interestingly enough, the data matters.
Absolutely.
You need a place to store that data. So for those healthcare organizations that continue to say, hey, I'm going to stay on-prem, it's going to get much more costly. It's also going to be much, much harder from a talent perspective. You're going to have fewer and fewer IT resources that know how to manage and maintain an on-prem environment. So when I take a step back and look at the backdrop of what's happening, now within this backdrop of these increased fees, this reduction in R&D spend in on-premise technology, you really have to ask yourself, should I move to a next generation platform, which essentially is public cloud?
Welcome to the Digital Healthcare Experience, brought to you by Taylor Healthcare. Subscribe now and stay on the forefront of the digital healthcare revolution.
Hello and welcome to the Digital Healthcare Experience podcast presented by Taylor Healthcare. I'm your host, Chris Civitaris, and today I'm joined by Dr. Tim Calahan, a clinical technology leader who specializes in cloud transformation and hosting Epic in the cloud. With a foundation in engineering, 2 master's degrees, and a doctorate, Dr. Calahan combines technical expertise with strategic vision to drive innovation. He has over 30 years of professional experience, including 25 years in healthcare and 15 years in management consulting. Currently, he serves as the Chief Technology Officer at Michigan Medicine. Welcome, Dr. Calahan. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Absolutely. And today we're going to be talking about how healthcare can modernize infrastructure through cloud migration. And to start, I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit about your background and your current role as CTO at Michigan Med.
Yeah, so a little bit about my background. I started my career in the Marine Corps, and then shortly thereafter spent a good portion of my time doing management consulting. And that really allowed me to kind of jump and see a lot of different industries, a lot of what works, a lot of what doesn't work. And that kind of provided a great foundation for my career. I spent most of my time in financial services and in healthcare consulting during my time in management consulting. And then I kind of moved and shifted and pivoted a little bit to building cloud products and solutions for vendors like NetApp and EMC, where I was the CTO for Dell VirtuStream's healthcare cloud. And that was really focused on hosting Epic in Dell's private cloud. I left that role to come over to Michigan Medicine, really to lead their digital transformation efforts. They had an IT modernization initiative that they were just getting ready to kick off. It really aligned to what I was doing in terms of moving Epic to the cloud and allowed me the opportunity to really look at, well, how do we move the rest of these workloads beyond and in addition to Epic to the public cloud. So that's what I've been spending the last 30 years doing.
It's awesome. And as you mentioned, Michigan Medicine is undertaking a really significant cloud migration effort kind of as we speak. I'm hoping, can you give us a high-level overview of what that transition looks like and why it's such a big deal?
I got to give my hats off to the Michigan Medicine executive team, Marshall Runge and Andrew Rosenberg, who really brought me in. They really had the vision of modernizing their IT infrastructure that existed. And they really wanted to make sure that public cloud was a big part of their transformation efforts. So when I came into the picture, it was really around trying to wrap my arms around what exactly do we have within Michigan Medicine and how do we perform a digital transformation that really makes sense and aligns to Michigan Medicine's business. It was a pretty significant undertaking. Because we're a public institution, we had to go out to RFP for just about anything we wanted to be able to do.
Yeah.
So we had to go to RFP to extend our wide area network, to ask for things like a cloud adjacent colo facility, to select a public cloud vendor, to select even system integrators that could help and assist in that migration, as well as kind of outline what the architecture might be, as well as, some of the workloads that we would specifically work on, things like Epic in the public cloud, Sector, which is our imaging application in the public cloud. So it is a significant digital transformation that we're just now beginning to embark on.
So when it comes to healthcare infrastructure, what are some of the biggest challenges for those health systems that say, hey, we get it, we're going to cloud, but, on-prem is kind of what we know and what we love. What would you tell a health system that kind of still has that perspective in terms of the challenges with staying on-prem in traditional data centers in healthcare?
It's a great question. And as I reflect on it over the last, 10 years, there was a lot of reasons why we felt moving to cloud was so helpful and provided so much value to healthcare. Again, it would allowed you to kind of refocus time, effort, energy on your people to the things that are really core to your business. But as time has progressed, what we've really seen is the actual infrastructure that we've relied on for the last 10, 20, 30 years is aging. And you're starting to see companies like Citrix who have been sold to venture capital. You've started to see VMware, which was bought and sold. You've started to see other types of technologies. And not to bash any of those companies, but you're starting to see increased fees for less R&D spend for those traditional tools and technologies. So for those organizations that have said, hey, we know on-prem, we're very comfortable with on-prem, staying on-prem is going to become much more difficult and much more costly over time as a result of some of these increased fees beginning to materialize. So you're starting to see VMware's fees increase by 5x or 10x. That's significant to a healthcare organization. You're starting to see Citrix fees double or triple. That's happened over the last 10 years. You're starting to see other technology vendors that have played in this on-prem space beginning to ratchet up those fees. And again, they're doing that without really providing a whole lot of features and functionality improvement in their on-prem products and services. So when I take a step back and look at the backdrop of what's happening, there was all the value that I saw in moving to the cloud 10 years ago. And now within this backdrop of these increased fees, this reduction in R&D spend in on-premise technology, you really have to ask yourself, should I move to a next generation platform, which essentially is public cloud?
Right.
And in moving to a next generation platform, I get modern tools and technologies that I couldn't implement or afford in my on-prem world. And I can make that available to my healthcare system. What I mean by that is we've talked about moving Epic to the cloud. We've talked about moving Sector to the cloud and all of our general purpose applications to the cloud. The move is the beginning of the journey, not the end of the journey.
Right.
Once everything has been moved, now we get to take part and take advantage of all the tools and technologies that modern clouds provide. So we selected Microsoft Azure as our preferred public cloud. And we did that because it provided us things like Azure Virtual Desktop. And we were one of the first globally to run Epic on an Azure Virtual Desktop, and we continue to grow and expand our footprint in that area. We have looked at how we implement Fabric. Fabric in Azure is going to allow us to reimagine really how we save data and hold data and collect data and basically provide that back to the organization. That goes back to that patient care. If I can analyze data and inject data back into the EHR in ways that I couldn't in my on-prem environment, now I'm saving lives and now I'm improving care. Those are the types of things that we want to be able to provide, and that's only possible in public cloud in this next generation type of architecture. So for those healthcare organizations that continue to say, hey, I'm going to stay on-prem, it's going to get much more costly. It's also going to be much, much harder from a talent perspective. I've talked about the challenges of getting talent reskilled and upskilled to the cloud. but that's what everyone is training on. If you go through computer science in college these days, or if you learn coding these days, you're doing that in the cloud. You're not doing that with on-prem tools and technologies. So you're going to have fewer and fewer IT resources that know how to manage and maintain an on-prem environment. And those, it's going to get harder and harder to retain and find those assets. Things like, hey, I want to maintain AIX. There's just not a lot of those people out there anymore. Right. So you've got to continue to move the organization forward. That's why I think public cloud and next generation public cloud infrastructure is so important.
Yeah, and you've talked about scalability, you've talked about talent, you've talked about all those other sort of resources in terms of data analytics, so on and so forth. I know one of the things that always comes up, obviously, with cloud is also security. So through your lens, how do you look at some of the, I'll say, puts and takes of, sort of the comfort level of having data kind of inside the confines versus data out in the public cloud? Where's your mind in terms of the advantages of public cloud from a security perspective?
Yeah, no doubt. Great question. When we looked at starting to move things to the public cloud 20, 30 years ago, security was a big question mark. Can it be as secure as my on-prem environment? I think we've largely crossed that bridge. And as we look at what we've done at Michigan Medicine, as we've moved out to the public cloud, we have every goal, intention, and expectation that we're actually going to create a more secure environment.
Right.
We're actually going to be able to segment our environment so that only certain endpoint devices can only talk to certain application servers. We don't have that in our on-prem world. We'll have that once we move to the cloud. We're going to have the ability to have different security policies on different applications or different sets of data than we have in our on-prem environment. We can have a high security, high data classification in the cloud, and we can set it right next to a low data classification in the cloud. Because in an academic medical center, you may have very sensitive data, which is clinical data, and you may anonymize that and make it, less risky, or you can have a low data classification. So the ability to create these segments and containers, if you will, in the cloud is so much easier than in the on-prem world, where in our on-prem world, it's really a one-size-fits-all kind of environment from a networking perspective, from a data perspective, and from a recovery perspective. So when we move things out to the cloud, we'll be more secure, number one. Number two is there's always the recovery aspect of that. I used to have an old client of mine, he was a CFO, and he always used to said, the backup's the easy part, it's the recovery part that's hard, right? So in a cyber event, you got to be able to recover. And we're implementing tools and technologies as we move out to the cloud that's going to help us. If a malicious actor gains hold of something, we're going to be able to reduce the blast radius. We'll already shrink wrap our sector environment, we'll shrink wrap our Epic environment, we'll shrink wrap our general purpose workloads. So it'll be much, much harder to gain access to everything, number one. And number two, we'll have different tools and technologies to be able to recover so much quicker than what we have in our on-premise environment. Our on-premise environment has a wide variety of legacy-based backup and recovery methods. And we're going to be going to that next generation platform, which gives us the ability to do snapshots, have next generation backup architecture, has the ability to figure out whether some malicious code has been injected, and be able to recover from it. All of those things are going to be available to us when we move out to the cloud. So we think we're going to be better positioned in the cloud than we have been in our on-prem environment. And we're going to check off a number of security boxes that our CISO has handed me over the last 2 or 3 years of please implement X, Y, and Z. And we'll be able to check off a number of those as we move out to the cloud.
Yeah, I think that's such an underrated sort of aspect of public cloud in terms of that, that misconception that it's actually less secure or harder to control and so on. So I think your perspective and leadership there is really important. And I'm happy to hear that maybe the industry is starting to understand that and move in that direction as well. And I know you mentioned, obviously this is such a huge undertaking at Michigan Medicine. You've talked about, I think, 85% or better of the environment moving to the public cloud. And obviously, specifically, you guys are a Microsoft Azure shop. And you're doing this at just an incredible scale and speed. And you described in really wonderful detail earlier the RFP process that you utilized and the planning and so on. I'm curious that as you started getting into the work, the actual transition, because it's just so massive, how did you approach that tremendous transition, and what were some of the other stakeholders that you had to corral, I guess, in order to make that happen?
So you're right. I've mentioned to Michigan Medicine that you hear of healthcare organizations moving Epic to the cloud. You hear of healthcare organizations moving Sectra to the cloud, and you'll hear of healthcare organizations moving general purpose applications to the cloud. I haven't heard of any that are going to do all three all at once. So I do think we're going to break some ground in the speed and the velocity of which we're undertaking these initiatives. The good news is moving up to the cloud is kind of second nature to me. There's a regimented process to execute and do that. And we've got a tremendous set of individuals that have kind of prepped us to execute on that in a very flawless and seamless way. So I have all the confidence in the world that the Epic move to the cloud is going to be very seamless. Similarly, the Sectra move to the cloud, we're actually leveraging Sectra as help and expertise to move us to the cloud, and they're actually providing their cloud-based service as a managed service. So we have a lot of confidence that as that migration begins to take hold, that will also be a seamless experience for the end user environment. And if you take those two applications, that's essentially 50% of your data center environment, 50% of my data center environment. So we've tackled half of the problem with those two big giant 800-pound gorilla applications. So really, the rest of it is how do you then begin to tackle the rest of it? I mentioned, our partner Ahead. We're beginning to set up what we call our application migration factory. So this is a set of process and procedure and technology that we will put in place in order to help move workloads from one place to the next. And this will require a significant amount of interaction between us and the business. And the business has asked repeatedly, what's going to be the impact to the move? And my answer has always been, you're not going to notice when we move you from point A to point B. So that's the good news. The bad news or the interaction is we will have to plan for that. And we will want to partner with the business to make sure that we fully understand what the application is, that we understand how to perform certain tests, which the teams call smoke tests, so that as we move things from one place to the next, that it's very well tested and well vetted, that the workload running in the cloud is a mirror image and is functionally equivalent to the on-prem workload and application environment. So that is going to be a tremendous amount of effort. We've stood up the application migration factory. We've got a lot of the process and procedure that we're beginning to flush out with our internal teams. We're about ready to provide that interaction with our application teams. Some of our application teams have actually started to raise their hands to say, hey, we're going to be early adopters in that move, which is great. So we'll move them sooner rather than later. But that bulk of that work and effort will really go back to really good planning, really good testing procedures, really good technology to make sure that the end result is seamless. And I mentioned again, once you get the workloads out in the cloud, that's really the beginning of the journey. We will right-size things as we move to the cloud, but we will also look at the application itself, and we tend to upgrade about 150 applications a year as just a natural kind of refresh cycle within Michigan Medicine. So we'll take that natural refresh cycle and we'll take an opportunity at that time to say, should we refactor this application, make it more cloud native? And I talked a little bit about the cloud native tools and technologies that we'll have available to us. That's what's going to enable us to tweak and change the application and make it better and more responsive to our end user environment than what it may have been in our on-prem environment.
I think it's so fascinating. I mean, the commitment to governance, process, sort of that methodical approach that you've taken and are taking, that seems to be, just intuitive, but maybe a step that people, I don't want to say gloss over, but maybe don't pay as much attention to as they should. Is that a fair assessment of what you're seeing out there?
Well, you're right in calling out that we view it as being very important. And I think I go back to my management consulting days in that
Right.
you really have to spend a lot of time with documentation and architecture and have a really
Yeah.
clear vision as to what you're going to build before you go out and build it. And it's not easy to do that. And it takes time, effort, energy to do that. But the result of that is your teams are very grounded in terms of what they're going to execute on. And everyone's
Right.
talked about it. So over the last 6 to 9 months to a year, we've been documenting what we're going to move into. We've been creating a blueprint of what the new house is going to be, and we're now
Yeah.
beginning to move into the new house. But we are very well versed in what that new house is going to provide and what it won't provide. So I think that planning effort is so important. And I've also, been in this business for about 30 years at this point. I've also seen other customers and other organizations that haven't taken this planning effort to heart. And they've had an executive mandate and they've had to rush into the cloud,
Right.
or they've had to move in directions where time they weren't afforded with the time that I was afforded with here at Michigan Medicine. And that that causes you to do maybe some unnatural things, and maybe causes you to cut some corners in ways that you wouldn't want to. So
Right.
my advice is, really take the time, really spend as much time doing planning. It's the old analogy, measure twice, cut once.
Yeah.
You really want to do that, because once you move things out to the cloud, if you don't do it right, and if you don't have planning for right sizing, if you don't have planning for refactoring, if you don't have planning for those things, then your costs can get a little out of control, and you may second guess the value that you'll get out of this next generation cloud architecture. So it's like anything else. You got to plan well for it. You got to execute on what you planned for, and then you got to fine tune and optimize, once you get out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're doing all of this in an environment where the technology is changing, I mean, at an obvious, accelerated pace as well. So I'm curious if you kind of look into your crystal ball and you look over, some time horizon. It's hard to say over the next 5 or 10 years, but over the next couple of years, as you think about all the changes that are coming in terms of, cloud technology, the compute that's going to be needed, the changes that are happening in terms of the new capabilities within the applications that are being serviced in the cloud. If I think about, my gosh, just every single angle of sort of the AI, obviously, all the technological changes that are evolving and reshaping healthcare. If you had to kind of think about what's going to be important in the next couple of years, where do you see it all going?
Well, I'm a little biased because I've been doing this move to the cloud for the last 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
and I still continue to think that yields a tremendous amount of value
Right.
to healthcare organizations and to organizations, across different verticals. So I still think that we're still early in that adoption curve. So I think you're still going to have a lot of organizations that are going in that direction.
Right.
And again, they're going in that direction because of the tools and technology. So from a healthcare perspective, everyone wants to talk about AI. And I've been blown away at generative AI and some of the capabilities that it provides. And you're already starting to see that in the clinical space, and Epic's doing some great things
Sure.
and embedding that into their product. Microsoft is doing some great things embedding it into their product with Nuance. So you're starting to see this, um, uh, the vendors being able to provide these tremendous capabilities. But interestingly enough, in an academic research institution, and ultimately if you're providing patient care, the data matters.
Absolutely.
So if you have data that sits in the EHR, whether it's generated by generative AI or not, and if you have data that's in ambient voice, if you have data that are in these other places, you need a place to store that data so that you can collect it, make it adjacent, make it usable back to your EHR, and ultimately to the care provider so that they can make relevant and good decisions based on that. And that's public cloud. If you're moving to public cloud and you're using tools like Fabric and you're using tools like OpenAI, even if you're not using Microsoft's version of OpenAI, you can still use that framework, and you can put your own generative AI models on there, and it would still give you access to all your applications and all your data in the same place. So I think that there's going to be a growing adoption of cloud and growing adoption of the tools and technologies, the platform that cloud provides, I think is a safe bet. Number two, we're starting to see some really cool, you mentioned security earlier in your program. We're starting to see some really cool security related products as it relates to the browser and as it relates to things like passwordless environments. And I think we're going to start seeing enhanced security. And we almost need to get there with some of the malicious type of behavior that's happening within healthcare and the target that healthcare is.
Sure.
So I think you're going to start seeing, both security products on the network side, security products on the browser side, security products in terms of passwordless securities also beginning to emerge and take shape and provide another protective blanket that maybe we haven't had in the past, that we're going to start seeing in the very near future, probably over the next couple of years into the next 5. And I also think end user computing is probably ripe for disruption in this traditional client server environment that we've had within healthcare. We're leveraging AVD as a method to maybe rethink that. We're looking at different enterprise browsers in terms of how we would think that. We're looking at some of these security products in terms of how we would manage who gets access to what application. So I think end user computing and how that's thought of in the clinical space, again, in order to enhance security, I think is another place that people could and will play in. And that's a mountain of work. If you just do those three things over the next 5 to 10 years, that's enough to keep you up at night. So there's likely others, but I continue to be completely impressed with generative AI and what it can provide and its ability to synthesize data, years and years of data, for like a patient, and be able to provide that back to a clinician is just mind-boggling. So I think you're going to have significant promise and implementations of these various types of technologies over the next 5 to 10 years.
It's going to be very exciting. I know we're almost at our time here, and I'd love to just open the floor one more time for you to share any final thoughts, any advice, anything at all that you'd like to share with the community here in closing.
Yeah, no, I welcome the opportunity, obviously, to talk about Michigan Medicine's journey and its move to the cloud. I've been blessed with really a unique opportunity to not just see Michigan Medicine's move to the cloud, but really about 10 different healthcare organizations in my time at Dell and EMC as they've moved to the cloud. I've also consulted with a number of organizations that are moving to the cloud to kind of help them move to public cloud. So I've seen about 20 or 30, direct interactions with customers that are moving to the public cloud. So this is a space that will yield value and will provide great results for the healthcare institutions that go down this path. And it's a well-marked path at this point. I would encourage organizations to move in that direction. If I can be of any help or service, please reach out. I would be happy to take that call and provide any thoughts or guidance or wisdom. But it's been absolutely delightful to talk a little bit about Michigan Medicine's cloud journey and the industry at large, and taking advantage of some of these next generation tools that are at our disposal, and how best to take advantage of them.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, Dr. Calahan. I have absolutely enjoyed the conversation. And as you move through this journey, I really hope you'll come and give us an update again on the progress that you're making and where this all is going. I, again, really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
And thank you also to our listeners. If you enjoyed the conversation, please like, share, and subscribe to help us keep growing the show. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about Taylor Healthcare and the digital healthcare experience, you can go to taylor.com/digital-healthcare. That's our show for today. And until next time, this is Chris Civitarice wishing you health and good cheer. Take care.
To learn more about Taylor Healthcare, please visit taylor.com/digital-healthcare. This podcast is for educational purposes only and is provided with the understanding that it does not constitute medical, legal, or financial advice or services. The Digital Healthcare Experience is produced by Naomi Schwimmer. Podcast music by Nicholas Bach.
Modern healthcare runs on data, but what do you do when your core systems go down? Introducing iMed Health from Taylor Healthcare. Digital tools that minimize risk with proactive solutions for downtime events. Go to imedhealth.com to learn more. Find the link in the show notes.